Hello, my name is John Ford, and welcome to my Proxmox Automated Environment Provisioning course series. In this video, we're going to be talking about how to set up a management machine that you can use to access the pfSense firewall's web interface and finish configuring your firewall. If you've been following along in this series, we've already gone ahead. We have set up a pfSense firewall as a virtual machine within Proxmox. In addition, we have booted it up for the first time, and we have set the network interfaces accordingly. Now it's time to finish our configuration in its web interface, but in order to do that, we need a management machine that has access to it. So in this video, I'm showing you how to set that up. Similarly to when installing pfSense, we're also going to have to download the ISO for the management machine that we want to use. In my case, I'm using Debian, so I went to debian.org/download, and I can get the ISO file from this link here. Now, instead of clicking on it and downloading it to my local machine, I will right-click and select Copy Link Address. This will copy the link address to my clipboard, and then I can download it directly to Proxmox. Going back to Proxmox, I can once again select the local option to access my local data store, select ISO images, and select Download from URL. Here, I'll paste the URL that I copied. Then I'll click Query URL. Once this has appeared and this looks good, I can rename it if I so desire. In this case, I'll just rename this to Debian and click Download. The download may take some time, so I will skip ahead until the download has completed. Now that the download has completed and I see Task OK at the bottom of the download page, I can X out of this and go ahead and create my Debian virtual machine. I can create a new virtual management machine by right-clicking on my server, which in this case is ECE2224, and selecting Create VM. From there, I'm going to provide a VM ID I would like to use for this virtual machine. As mentioned previously, if you would like this virtual machine to appear below pfSense, provide it with a higher VM ID. In this case, I will provide VM ID 222. I'll also give it a name. This name can be anything you'd like, but in my case, I'll call it Manager, and select Next. From here, my operating system is indeed Linux, and I will select the ISO image that I previously downloaded, debian.iso, then select Next. On the system page, I will leave the defaults, except that I will click the checkbox next to QEMU agent to enable the QEMU agent. I will do this because I plan on installing the QEMU guest agent on my virtual machine later, so that it can better interface with Proxmox. Checking this box tells Proxmox to look for the QEMU agent on the virtual machine. From here, I'll click Next. I will change the disk size to 16 gigabytes. Since I plan to install multiple services on this machine, I would like to have a sufficient size disk in order to account for those services that I plan to install. From here, I'll click Next. Since I have plenty of cores on my Proxmox server, I will provide this virtual machine with 4 cores. Again, this may not be necessary, and it might be worth starting out with only 1 core and then bumping it up from there later on if you see that the machine is struggling. In my case, I have plenty of cores on my Proxmox instance, And I do plan to also use this management machine as a web server, and therefore I would like to give it decent specifications, so I will provide it with 4 cores. For the memory, I'll provide it with 8 gigabytes of RAM, which is 8192 megabytes. For the network bridge, I will stick with the default bridge it provides me of VMBR0. As I mentioned earlier in this series, VMBR0 is the network bridge that is directly connected to the internet. I do need for Debian to provide this virtual machine with internet access, and so I need to connect it to a bridge that allows it to have internet access. Please note that you cannot connect this to the bridge that is being used for the LAN on your pfSense instance. This is because we didn't yet configure DNS on the LAN for pfSense. The DNS has to be configured using the web interface, which we will access later. This means that you will not be able to resolve domain names like debian.org, for example, to IP addresses. Therefore, instead of using the LAN, I am simply providing this virtual machine with the bridge that already has internet access. Later on, I will switch this over so that it is on the LAN for pfSense when we want to manage pfSense. Hopefully this makes sense. Anyway, I'll click Next. This all looks good, so I will click Finish. Once the virtual machine has been created, I can click on the new virtual machine, click on Console, and click on Start Now to start the virtual machine. Once the virtual machine has started, I am provided with multiple options. In my case, I will choose the graphical install. I can do this by pressing Enter. Once the graphical installer has booted, I will select English as my language to be used for the installation process and click Continue. I'll select United States as my region because I'm currently located in the United States, and click Continue. From here, you can choose any keyboard layout you would like. In most use cases, you would probably want to stick with the American English keyboard. However, for me, I am more comfortable using the Dvorak keyboard, so I will switch my keyboard to Dvorak and click Continue. I have now skipped ahead until after Debian has loaded the network interfaces and also obtained the installation media. And now I am greeted with this page that asks me to choose a host name for this system. I like to keep my host names consistent with my machine names that I provide in Proxmox. This is not necessary, but recommended. For this reason, I will name my machine Manager and click Continue. If you have a domain name, or if you are located on a domain, you may enter that domain name here. In my case, I'll just leave it blank and click Continue. Now I am asked to choose a root password. This password will be used for the root user on your system. Therefore, it is very important that you choose a secure root password. For demonstration purposes, I will choose password capital P, password, 123 exclamation point as my password. I will re-enter the password so that it is the same both times and click Continue. Now it's asking me to provide a full name for the default user on Debian. Here I could go ahead and provide my name. However, I don't necessarily care to provide my name especially if other people will also be using this management machine, so I'm just going to click Continue. Now it asks me to create a username for my account. I'll just call the username Manager and click Continue. You're welcome to choose any username you would like as long as you can remember it. Now it's asking me to create a password for the manager user. In this case, for demonstration purposes, I will once again make my password capital P password 123 exclamation point. However, in your case, feel free to choose a more secure password. From here, I'll select my time zone. In my case, I am in the Central Time Zone and click Continue. I am then brought to this page that asks me how I would like to partition my disk. I will just say use the entire disk and click Continue. I'll put all files in one partition and click Continue. And if this looks good, I'll make sure that Finish Partitioning and Write Changes to Disk is selected and click Continue. I do in fact want to write changes to the disks. I understand that this will erase everything that is currently on the disk. However, my disk is only being used for this new virtual machine that I just created, so there's nothing on it. So I will click Yes and Continue. Once the base system is installed, it now asks me if I wish to scan more media. I do not have any additional installation media, so I will leave No and click Continue. From here, I will select United States as my region, click Continue. And I will just choose the Debian archive mirror of deb.debian.org. This is the default Debian archive mirror. That should be fine for me. If this mirror does not work for you, you may always come back to this page later in installation and try a different mirror and see if you have better luck. I do not have any HTTP proxy, and so I will leave this blank and simply select Continue. Once apt has been configured, I am now asked if I would like to participate in the package usage survey. However, I like to keep my network traffic to a minimum, and so I will leave this at its default option of No and click Continue. Now it asks me what additional software I would like to install. This is up to you, but for sure install the standard system utilities and one of the Debian desktop environments. This will allow you to, in a web browser, view the pfSense configuration. I prefer the XFCE desktop environment over GNOME, therefore I will select FXCE and deselect GNOME. Note that there is a web server option if you wanted to install a web server. However, the setup scripts for Proxmox and pfSense remote management will go ahead and install a web server for me, so I can just leave this option unchecked and click Continue. Once the system and additional packages have been fully installed, it asks if I would like to additionally install the grub bootloader. Because this is the only operating system on this disk, it does make sense to install the grub bootloader. Therefore, I will leave the already selected option of Yes and click Continue. From here, I will choose the device or the disk on which I would like to install the grub bootloader. I will choose the only available disk, which is dev SDA, then click Continue. Once the grub bootloader has finished installing, the installation is complete, so I can reboot directly into the new system. However, as it mentions here, it's important to first remove the installation media so that we for sure boot into the new system rather than restarting the installation. In order to do that, I will head over to the Hardware tab. I will click on the CD and DVD drive and click Edit. From here, I can select Do Not Use Any Media to effectively remove the virtual disk and click OK. Now you'll notice that the CD and DVD drive is still there. However, it says None, meaning no disk is inserted. Going back to the Console tab, I can now click Continue to reboot the system. Once the virtual machine has finished rebooting, you should be greeted with a login screen similar to this one. In order to log in, enter the credentials for the user you created during installation. In my case, I named the user Manager, and I provided the user with the password with a capital P, 123 exclamation point. So I will enter this to log in. Once logged in, there are a couple of additional changes I would like to make to the system. In order to do this, I will open a terminal window. Depending on your installation, you may open a terminal window differently, but in my case, it's right here on the desktop. So I will click to open the terminal. First of all, I would like to update and upgrade all of my installed packages. However, in order to do this, I need to be the root user. Currently, I am running as user manager. I can switch to the root user by simply typing in su and pressing enter for switch user. Now I have to enter the password that I provided for the root user since I am switching to the root user. In my case, I provided the root user with the same password, capital P, password, 123 exclamation point. Once this is entered, I now have a root shell and can execute further commands as root. I'm going to update and upgrade the packages on my system with apt update and apt upgrade. I'll add -y in order to bypass the confirm message that requires me to confirm whether or not I'd like to install the upgrades. In addition, I will install the QEMU guest agent As I mentioned previously, the QEMU guest agent will help this machine to interact with my Proxmox instance. Among other things, it will allow me to go to the Summary tab and see a list of IP addresses that are currently assigned to my virtual machine here. As you can see here, it seems that the QEMU guest agent has already been installed, so perhaps I don't need to do this step. But in your case, the QEMU guest agent may not have been automatically installed, and so just in case, it doesn't hurt to add this command. Another thing I should mention is if your Linux installation uses a different package manager other than apt, for example apt-get or yum, you may have to update these commands accordingly. Anyway, now that this is completed, I can press enter to continue with the package installation process. You'll notice that this ran rather quickly. It doesn't seem that any packages needed updating because I already had all the latest versions. This is probably due to the fact that I ran a network installer, so during the installation process, it already grabbed the latest packages from the internet. The last thing I'm going to do is add my manager user to the sudo group. The reason I'm going to do this is so that then, as a manager, I don't have to switch to the root user anymore. I can simply run commands as the root user by prefixing them with sudo. In order to do this, I will edit the etc group file. This file defines which users are in which group in Linux. I will use the nano file editor to edit this file. However, you are welcome to use V or Vim or any other editor that you choose. If I do nano etc group, I can search for sudo, and at the end of the line, I'll add manager. I'll press Ctrl-O to save this file and Ctrl-X to exit. Now that we have made these changes, we can shut down the machine by clicking here on the top right portion of the screen and clicking Shut Down. I will once again click Shut Down to confirm that I do want to shut down the machine. Now that the machine has been shut down, it is time to add it to the LAN network that we previously created in pfSense. This will allow us to directly access pfSense and make configuration changes through the web interface. In order to do this, I will click on Hardware. I will go to the network device and click Edit, and I will switch the bridge from VMBR0, which is our bridge that we're using for internet access, to VMBR1, which has the comment LAN. From here, I'll click OK. The other thing that I'll do, which is optional but recommended, is I will remove this CD/DVD drive. This is because I don't plan on inserting any additional disks to the VM. I'll simply click on it and click Remove and select Yes. Now I can go back to the console and I can reboot my manager machine. When I reboot my manager machine, it should now automatically be on the same LAN network that we previously created in pfSense. pfSense should automatically assign it an IP address. To log in, I will once again enter my credentials of manager and capital P password 123 exclamation point. Once logged in, I'll make sure everything worked correctly by going to the terminal and typing in IP space A for IP address. If everything worked correctly, you should have been assigned automatically an IP address through DHCP. Please note that your pfSense virtual machine must be running for this IP address to be correctly assigned. Another thing I will verify is that I can now run sudo because I am part of the sudoers group, or part of the sudo group. I will do this by typing in sudo-l. I once again type in the manager's password, which is capital P password 123 exclamation point. You'll notice that now we get a message that says user manager may run the following commands, and it shows all commands. This means that now we no longer have to switch to the root user when we want to run commands as root. Instead, we can prefix commands with sudo. From here, I'll open a web browser, which for me is also right on the desktop. And I'll navigate to the IP address of pfSense. If you remember from the previous video, I set pfSense's address in the LAN to be 192.168.1.1. I'm receiving a security risk ahead message because pfSense is using a self-signed certificate for secured HTTP. This is okay with me. I will just click Advanced, scroll down, and click Accept the risk and continue. If all worked properly, you should now see the pfSense web interface, and you should be able to log in. We will talk about configuring pfSense through the web interface in the next video.